So first I wanted to just give a little bit of an overview of Oregon Food Bank and our work in our feast event and our interest in hosting these webinars. So at Oregon Food Bank, our community food systems team envisions communities across Oregon and Southwest Washington where citizens are empowered and actively engaged across sectors to attain personal and community food security. And our community feast, which stands for Food, Education, Agriculture Solutions Together, program provides a menu of community organizing methods to help communities mobilize around improving their local food systems. Feast participants engage in an informed and facilitated discussion about food, education, and agriculture in their community and begin to work towards solutions together to help build a healthier, more equitable, and more resilient local food system. And communities that have participated in our feast program have formed and expanded farm-to-school partnerships between rural school districts and local farmers, built community connectivity and formed regional action networks, created new farmers markets and community gardens, increased acceptance of WIC and senior farm direct checks and WIC fruit and veggie vouchers at farmers markets, and formed new and innovative partnerships between food donors and emergency food providers. And over the last 5 years, we've hosted over 70 feast events throughout Oregon, and the model has been replicated in 6 other states. In May of 2013, we hosted a facilitators training and have plans to host more facilitator trainings in the future. And if you're interested in the facilitator training, just be sure to send me an email. And as the program grows, our focus is increasingly on developing and supporting a network of food system advocates and organizers actively engaged in this, improving their own communities and Oregon and beyond. We call this the Feast Leadership Network, and our current focus for the Feast Leadership Network is a quarterly webinar series which provides feast participants, OFB-trained feast facilitators, and other interested parties an opportunity for knowledge exchange on a range of community food system topics. And so that's why we're here today. And again, our topic is farmer networks, getting started and how can they help. And a farmer network is a way for farmers to exchange information, socialize, learn, and connect with peers on a regular, ongoing basis. What is most important about a farmer network and sets it apart from, for example, traditional extension university-based classes is that the farmers decide what they want to learn and create together. And data suggests that when farmers convene, new opportunities arise for increased economic viability, improved quality of life, and greater community interaction. And that description was taken from a guide to farmers markets, or Creating Farmer Network Toolkit from Oregon State University Extension, and we'll be hearing from some of the co-authors of that toolkit today for this webinar. So just briefly wanted to go over the agenda for today. We'll start with our presentation, and we have some wonderful guests to talk about the Farmer Network Toolkit and an example of a farmer network here in Oregon. And then finally we'll close with a question and answer period where you can all ask questions to our presenters. And I'll be muting all non-presenters for this webinar, but if you have a question at any point throughout the webinar, please type it into the chat box and I will make a note of it and be sure to ask it during our question and answer session. And so with that, I will turn it over to our presenters. First I'm going to get up there. Presentation. And before we get started, I just want to do a brief introduction to our presenters. So today we'll be hearing from Oregon State University Extension Small Farms agents Melissa Ferry and Melissa, including Benton, Lane, and Lynn counties. Her special interests include small-scale livestock and pasture production and soil quality. And Melissa has been coordinating the Willamette Women's Farmer Network since 2008. And our other presenter is Maud Powell, who runs the OSU Extension Small Farms program in Jackson and Josephine counties in southern Oregon, specializing in beginning farmer education and seed production. She and her husband have owned and operated Wolf Gulch Farm, a small diversified vegetable and seed farm in the Little Applegate Valley for 15 years. Maud worked for 10 years as the project manager for the Siskiyou Sustainable Cooperative and currently coordinates their community-supported agriculture program. Maud is passionate about reinvigorating rural communities by strengthening local economies and increasing food and fiber production. So with that, I will turn it over to Melissa and Maud. And it looks like we do not have our first slide up. There we go. All right, so Melissa and Maud, you can take over.
Great. So we just wanted to spend a couple minutes introducing ourselves a bit more and talk a little bit about the farmer networks that we've been a part of. My colleague and I, Melissa Matthewson, who's the other co-author of our toolkit, in 2007 we decided to start a women farmers network. We were both women farmers ourselves, and we're interested especially in skill building. We found that on our farms it was our husbands who were running the tractors and doing the fencing and setting up irrigation systems, and we were interested in learning some of those skills with other women farmers. And so in our positions as extension agents, we decided to start what we now call the League of Women Farmers. So it's been a really successful, popular part of our extension programming. We meet on a monthly basis, and we do the skill building sessions along with potlucks. We bring in educational speakers. We do farm tours, so most of the women that are actively involved in our network have hosted tours of their farms. And so, yeah, we've been running since 2007 and meeting pretty much on a monthly basis since that time. The other farmer network that I've been a part of as a participant is the Northwest Farmer to Farmer Network, which is it's about 100 farmers are involved. We have an annual meeting at Brighton-Bush Hot Springs, which is a huge draw for people. And we also have a listserv that's active throughout the year. But we meet for about 3 days a year at Brighton-Bush, and we basically create our own agenda. So we decide on what topics people are interested in discussing, whether it's how to build soil fertility, how to manage pests, if you're running a CSA, what are marketing strategies to expanding your CSA, that type of thing. So it's completely grassroots, kind of organic. We decide ourselves what we're going to talk about. We facilitate the groups ourselves. So we don't have any kind of ag professionals that are managing it. It's a self-organizing group, which is fantastic. And that's a group that was started by, or it's funded by Oregon Tilth, an organically grown company, which is a distributor around the Northwest. So those are, I just wanted to give you a little bit of background on the farmer networks that I've been involved in.
Hi, I'm Melissa Ferry. I work for OSU Extension as well. I'm Maud's colleague, but I serve a region a little further north in Oregon in the Willamette Valley. And I started coordinating the Willamette Women's Farm Network in 2008 for much of the same reasons Maud described. We work in small farms extension, and there's a tremendous amount of small farms owned by women farmers, and we were trying to find a way to serve them in a better way. So the network started then and has grown, and we'll share some examples of our experiences with the network. Also, Maud and our other colleague Melissa Matthewson and I worked on creating this Pacific Northwest Extension publication about creating farmer networks. And while we use our women network experience as an example, the concept of farmer-to-farmer networks could work for any group of farmers. And I think with that, Maud, let's go ahead and get started and describe why we create a network.
Yeah, so what we're seeing, I mean, the whole, we're extension agents, and so part of the philosophy of extension is that you're taking university-based research and knowledge and you're extending it out into rural communities. But what we were realizing more and more is that that wasn't taking into account all the knowledge that's just already out there in rural communities and the practice of people that are working on the ground. And so the idea of creating the farmer network is to not only kind of capitalize on the practical knowledge out there, but also to create vibrant communities, communities of practice where people are actually, they're applying different principles to their farms and can share experiential knowledge. And we had, after about 2 years of our League of Women Farmers, we had a woman who was a grad student, Jennifer Almquist, who did some qualitative research on our League of Women Farmers to look at what the impacts were. So she did in-depth interviews with about 20 of our participants, and what she came up with was 5 impacts. The first of which we'll go through them was the creation and mentoring of relationships between beginning and experienced farmers. We have not really tried to create these mentorship relationships. There's some other extension small farms programs around the countries that have actually gotten funding to support mentorship relationships. What we've seen is just these mentoring relationships just kind of happen naturally through the network process. So whether that's people that are interested in farming and then getting an internship with an experienced farmer, or just having just building these relationships, often between neighbors that would meet at our League of Women Farmers events. The second impact that we saw was that, at least with the Women Farmers Networks, we saw that there was this increase in confidence and a sense of identity. And we're seeing, this is at a time when we're seeing more and more women as the sole operators of farms, women taking a leadership role in sustainable agriculture, small-scale agriculture. And so seeing this transformation of women as just like the farm wives that are doing canning and raising the kids and maybe doing some of the garden work, into really having this sense of identity as the women farmers, as the sole operators. And again, a lot of this we saw through these skill building sessions. The shot in that last picture was from a welding class. That's okay. That is from a welding class where our group of women got together and built a gate for one of the women farmers. Go to the next slide. Often there's a lot of competition between farmers. You might have your booth next to another grower at market and you're watching them, take some of your customers. We've seen our League of Women Farmers kind of act as an antidote to that a little bit. Just a lot of camaraderie, support between farmers, seeing all that we have in common, working towards common goals, looking at developing infrastructure and markets that can benefit all of us. And then we've used our League of Women Farmers, we've used it, and the same with the Brighton Bush. It's just been a great avenue to actually deliver educational programs. So whether it's bringing in an expert on a specific topic or pulling together a panel of different marketing options. So it's just been a great way to transfer knowledge to our producers in kind of the extension model, but in a different way where people are more participatory. And as Spencer mentioned in his introduction, most of the topics that we cover are things that the producers have specifically requested, or they may even request a specific individual to come and speak to our group. And then finally, Jennifer Almquist, she reported that there were a number of different business relationships that happened as a result of the League of Women Farmers, whether it was through bringing in this marketing panel that we did fairly early on, and we saw some relationships come out of that. There were a couple of women early on that decided to join forces and start a winter CSA together because neither of them really had enough produce to do their own CSA, so they teamed up. We saw a lot of these different types of marketing and business relationships developed.
So some of those benefits of operating or coordinating a farmer-to-farmer network is that it truly is a venue for peer-to-peer discussion. We have advisory committees that try to help us in Extension and probably other agricultural and food-based organizations to try to deliver programs and reach out to producers in a way that meets their needs. And our advisory committee for our extension program is comprised of farmers and stakeholders, and peer-to-peer discussion and learning ranks #1 as the top need and the way that we should be reaching out to our clients, because this is where innovative production and marketing strategies and learning happens from each other. And while in Extension we like to think that we hold all the knowledge that people want to know, those that are on the ground doing this work day after day, no matter the scale of the farming operation or the type of production, they really have so much knowledge to share, and the other farmers benefit from that sharing. And as an extension professional, the networks are just a wonderful way to reach out and provide this really relevant information to producers. They respond well, they show up, they are engaged, they want to talk to each other, not just about the topic or the skill building activity that might be happening that day, but about other things happening on the farm and in their lives. And that's truly a benefit, because it really does show that there's an increased community interaction when these farmers get together. Through our own evaluation of our Oregon Women Farmers Networks and from other data, we know that when farmers get together, there's all kinds of opportunities that can arise. So we've seen business starting up together, cooperatives, which will help increase economic viability. And just getting together with a group of your peers really can improve the quality of life. Really understanding that you're not in this alone, that there's other people working just as hard as you and having similar troubles, and being able to work through that in discussion with each other is also a great benefit. I'd also like to say that while mods in my experience are primarily with small farms and sustainable agriculture production, we also have a couple other farmer networks in Oregon that have seen these same sorts of benefits. And one is for small and large scale pasture. It's a grazing group. So it's for pasture-based livestock producers, and they meet on a monthly basis at different farms talking about different topics. And also, Dan McGrath with OSU Extension Horticulture used to reach out to large-scale vegetable producers that grew for Norpac Cannery, and they would have what they call twilight tours in the summer months and fall, talking specifically about production issues. So there's all different ways to address getting our peer-to-peer learning happening and having farmer-to-farmer networks that might benefit you professionally and the people that you're working with.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about how to get your network started. And I'm not exactly sure who our audience is, if it's ag professionals or farmers or community organizers. But obviously the first thing you want to do is kind of think about what the need might be. And this might actually be through doing a needs assessment with some of the farmers in your area. Find out who could use some additional support, either through the community or through an ag professional who can provide technical information, or to provide that organizing capability of convening a group. So we suggest that if you can, you kind of think about what your target audience might be, whether it's women farmers or large-scale wheat producers or berry producers or beginning farmers. All of those could be potential target audiences. And then we recommend finding kind of a core group or what you might call a steering committee, and to convene that initial meeting, usually through invitation. And we recommend really having a steering committee of somewhere between 5 and 10 members. Obviously, the larger you get, the more opinions you're going to have, and it can actually be tricky to steer your organization through that process if you have too many different ideas. But if you have relationships already in the community, you know who some of those key people are that you really want their initial buy-in. You want them to be at the table. You want to hear what they see the needs are, what the potential for an ag network would be. Next slide. Great. Okay, so a few things that you'll want to consider is thinking about your geographical area. And this can be, again, networks are very fluid and flexible. You can create a network. You could have a national network. You can create a network just within your county or just within a small, small valley if you wanted. But thinking about what is your geographical area going to be? If you're in if you're talking about like a specialty niche product, you may want a larger geographical area. If you're just going to invite all the farmers, you may just want to consider a smaller geographical area. But the main things to think about the geographical area is that it's going to impact how often you meet and where you meet. And so for the Northwest Farmer to Farmer Conference, because we're covering 3 states in the Northwest, we're just meeting on an annual basis and then relying on our listserv. Whereas with our League of Women Farmers, we are a 2-county region, so we're offering monthly visits. So it's going to make a difference. Creating a name and mission statement. A couple anecdotes here. With our League of Women Farmers, we were just kind of calling it the Women Farmers Group. We didn't really have a name. And then it was actually the secretary in our extension office who was creating an attendance sheet for us and just kind of slapped on the name League of Women Farmers. And it just stuck. So it was kind of random. And in some ways it was easy for us because we didn't have to go through the process of figuring out a name. It just kind of happened for us. Whereas Melissa Ferry, do you want to jump in here and tell the story of your name creation? It's a little more cumbersome.
It was very cumbersome. So the whole point of Farmer to Farmer Networks is that the planning comes from the group, and as a coordinator, you try to help facilitate that. So our group chose to create a subcommittee to develop the name suggestions, and then we narrowed those down to 4, and then the membership all voted, and there wasn't consensus, so then we voted again and created the Willamette Women's Farm Network. And it cracks us up because it's not a very original name, but it did come from the membership. It describes who we are. It even includes the region that we are living and working in, and then they also created a tagline and a mission statement. So it was quite a cumbersome process, and I laugh at Maud's story when there's just a name and that's what it is, but there's no right way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, things to consider, though, is it is kind of nice to have the geographical area within the name, like the Willamette Women's Farm Network or the Northwest Farmer to Farmer Network. That's useful to have in the name, and maybe a short descriptor. There's a women's network in the North Willamette, and they have the nice acronym of WAGGIES. I believe do you remember, is it Women Ag Group? I believe is what it stands for. So if you can come up with a name that has a fun little acronym, that can be a nice way to name your group as well. And then the mission statement is great. That really helps with the self-selection process. If you're not aware, mission statements are best if they're just 1 or 2 sentences long. Keep it short, straight, who the group is, what your purpose is. That's really all that you need to say. I like that the Willamette Women's Farm Network has that tagline as well. That's nice for branding and marketing. And so the mission statement's great. If you have somebody that's interested in your network, you can just shoot them the mission statement. They can tell pretty quickly whether or not it's something that they want to be involved in. Determining a plan for membership records. This is this is something that we learned from experience would have been helpful to know at the outset of setting up our networks. And this just refers to when you have people sign up, thinking through before you start that process of recruiting members, what kind of information you want to have about the members, so that when they sign up, either there's a membership form, either online or paper, or however you're going to sign people up. Obviously, you're going to want their name and their contact information, but you might want to think about having additional information. For example, what kind of production farm they have, how long they've been in operation, what their markets are. All those kind of records can be really useful as you determine your programming and you think about what you're going to do as a group. And then recruiting members. Again, I think that if you have that buy-in early on with some of the key producers in your area or in the specialty crop or if you have those people already in place, they're often really helpful in terms of word of mouth recruiting. We did most of our recruitment through our email list that we had through Extension already. We've used social media quite a bit for recruitment, and I think Melissa talks a little bit more about that in the next section. So I just want to make a final note about starting your network, thinking about funding sources. So in our cases, we already had Extension positions that were funded by the state, where we had a little bit of room, we had some hours within that job description to devote to networking, to creating the networks. We've found that it's really useful to have someone that is in a paid position where it's not just a volunteer position who is in charge of organizing and convening the network. So whether you have somebody that's in an agency or an extension position, and you're able to make the case that this is a really worthwhile way to spend some time, that there's real impacts, you're reaching a lot of people through a network. Otherwise, there's definitely funding through different grants. We've had some success through some of the beginning farmer grants in getting some positions funded for networks. Another thing to consider is with the Northwest Farmer to Farmer model, they receive funding, as I mentioned, from Oregon Till, as well as from Organically Grown Company. So those entities pay a small stipend to an organizer who's able to run that network.
There's also the opportunity to charge membership dues, which might help offset the cost of a coordinator. One thing that I have found out as we've moved through different ways of coordinating the Willamette Women's Farm Network is that once established, it takes anywhere from like 5 to 7 hours a week to coordinate the group, and that would include with a monthly meeting tossed in there of some sort. So it's not a huge time commitment, but again, just to reiterate what Maud said, if there's someone in a paid position of some sort that can serve as that coordinator, it will just really help keep consistency and the flow of the network going. So communicating with your network, there's all different ways, obviously, that you can communicate. Listservs right now are pretty popular. There's pros and cons with listservs. With the Northwest Farmer to Farmer Exchange and with the network that I coordinate, listservs are our main source of communication, and it's a place where people can ask questions and get answers, and we can make gathering announcements, that sort of thing. We have set up some ground rules for the listserv, but I don't moderate it, and a lot of people are surprised by that. And the reason I don't feel like I need to moderate it, and we haven't had any issues with it, is because periodically we just go back and look at that mission statement that the group came up with at the very beginning. And so if there's a question, whether or not they should send out a particular piece of information, something political or whatever they would like to, oftentimes they'll just send me an email first and say, what do you think about this? And I'll reply back with the mission statement. And I say, if it fits within this mission statement and you feel good about sending it, then go for it. It's your network. And sometimes they'll go ahead and send it, and sometimes they won't. And with that sort of strategy, we've been able to just really keep the listserv open. We've also dealt with the issues of please don't reply all for a personal response to a question to try to keep down email traffic. And for the most part, it's worked really well. Other forms of social media, both the League of Women Farmers and my network use Facebook pages, mostly to just share photos of events and gatherings that happen, but also for meeting announcements and that sort of thing. Emails too, of course. The League of Women Farmers, they don't have a listserv. They communicate through an email list, and that works really well for them. Neither Maud or I have tried out Twitter, but that would be another option for social media. We do have websites, They're not very great websites, but they do have the contact information for the coordinators and some information about different past events and things that have happened within the network. I've seen some farmer-to-farmer network websites across the country that are very well done, and they even have capacity for communication between farmers on the website platform. And that's something that if you have that knowledge, or maybe some of the farmers in your network have skills from past occupations to help with that. Direct mailings are a bit archaic nowadays, but they work really well as an initial invitation to join the network. So with a description of what was happening and why the network was getting started, and that worked out well. But I think mostly through different electronic media we're able to communicate well. And then phone calls. Mods Network, they make an effort every year around the time of their annual meeting to place a phone call to all of their membership. And that's a way for them to check in, make sure that they have the correct email addresses and contact information for their members. They end up leaving a lot of messages for people because people aren't answering their phones, but it's still that personal communication, which we're pretty sure means something to them. So all different ways of communicating. Maud, do you have anything to add to that?
We've seen social media as a great place to post photos too. So I don't know if you mentioned that, but that's been really fun. Actually, the picture on the screen right now is we had a bouquet making party. One of our women farmers got married, and so we all got together a couple of days before a wedding and spent the day making bouquets. And so there were obviously lots of beautiful pictures, and that was fun to get up on social media. So that's a nice application for it as well. So now that you have kind of come up with your mission statement, you've recruited members, I think of this as the really fun part of having a network, is planning the program. So thinking about how often you're going to meet and then what you're going to do during the meeting times. So we have done some needs assessment. We usually have an annual meeting in December every year, and we have our members show up to that. We always have a potluck. Food is a big part of our farmer network. The women in our network love to cook and kind of showcase the products from their farms and ranches. So it's everything tends to revolve around food at our programs, which I think really keeps people coming back too. And so we in December at our annual meeting, we'll kind of get some white paper up and start brainstorming what people would like to do for the following year. And then from that list, I usually send out a survey, because we'll generate between 20 and 30 different ideas. And so from that list, then I'll go through and send out a survey monkey and have people decide which activities they would most like to see happen during the year. So I do a little bit of surveying on that. And then based on that, I basically have 12 activities that I get to plan for the year. And we try to mix it up. The first year, we alternated between meeting at the extension office for either a lecture or a specific discussion. One point we talked about balancing farm and family. We've talked about the ergonomics of farming. And then the other, on alternate months, we would do farm tours, so we'd be actually at women's farms. And then we always have these skill building sessions. This picture is from a tractor maintenance class that we had at Extension. That's our farm manager who ran the class. We typically try to bring in, for our League of Women Farmers, we try to bring in women who are the teachers. So we had a women welder come in, a woman carpenter when we've offered carpentry classes. But skill building is always really popular with our league. Then classes on production and marketing. This is just run the gamut from cheese making, beekeeping, small scale ranching, and anything. farm management workshop. So next month we're actually bringing in an accountant to talk about various business, like types of business models for farmers to choose from. And as I mentioned, farm tours are just always popular. People love to get out and see each other's places. We've had a couple of fun events at some of our members who are beginning farmers. We've had groups come out and kind of offer advice or offer what people see on their farms, so potential for future infrastructure projects. And that's been a really nice way to support beginning farmers.
Oops.
We've had a number of discussion groups as well. I mentioned some of the topics we've covered. With our League of Women Farmers, we actually had an agricultural book club that ran for about a year. So we chose a book that was somehow related to agriculture, and we'd all try to read the book. That obviously dwindled during the summer months when there wasn't a lot of time for reading, but we had some really good discussions. And I think for a lot of producers, you know, there's so much physical labor involved that it's actually really nice and kind of stimulating, intellectually stimulating to have discussions about topics. And then we, as I mentioned, we do an annual meeting every December, and that's kind of a wrap-up of the year. We have it. We usually have a food contest that we'll have like bring a winter squash dish, and then we all vote on which one is the best, and we hand out door prizes. And that's, like I mentioned, that's the meeting that we always kind of brainstorm topics for the following year. And then in February, we have started to do an annual retreat as well. And in past years, it's just been a one-day retreat, usually on a farm. We'll bring in a yoga teacher. We usually, obviously there's lots of great food around. We'll do a hike. We'll talk about planning for the upcoming year. And then this February, we actually had a 2-night retreat at the Oregon coast, which was really just R&R. But again, it was very bonding. There's a very tight group of women now down here that support each other throughout the year. And then social gatherings. This was actually a different bouquet making party that we had, but just supporting those relationships through regular social interaction.
Some of these ideas might seem a little frou-frou to some of you, but again, it's coming from the membership. It's what they want. Maybe they're, you know, just really starving for some social time or a weekend away, and they're responding to that and determining what their needs are, and they change. We might do several kind of skill building activities in a row, or production type meetings, a classroom meeting on GAP certification, different things like that. And then, you know, we need a break, and we'll do something completely fun or off the wall. And it's really neat that we're able to serve these farmers in that way. Facilitation of networking programs. So with any program, whether it be a farmer-to-farmer network or something different, the quality of the meeting or tour or discussion is influenced by that group facilitator. And it might be you serving as a coordinator, the facilitator might be a farmer who's leading a tour, but taking the time to really understand group dynamics or helping the farmer that's leading the activity or skill building class understand how to be a good facilitator is pretty important. Oops, it's skipping ahead. There we go. Oh. So we just encourage people as they embark on this sort of educational activity to consider the details, and that would include things like the environment, where the meeting is being held, and all aspects of that, the location, if it's a room, the size and lighting and the heat, if it's a tour, the heat, making sure there's water, if you're meeting in the winter, is there a warm place that you can you'll meet after the tour and warm up and have some social time. logistics.
Can I jump in here for one
Oh,
sec?
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, in the toolkit that we'll give you the link to at the end of this webinar, there is a farm tour checklist. So it's a useful resource because it kind of helps you think through your farm tour, and you can actually go over it with the farmer that you're working with to think about, like, what are the stops on the tour, how long are you going to spend at each of the stops so that you don't spend your entire time in the barn looking at a piece of equipment when you really want to be out there looking at cover crops. That type of thing. So that's a useful resource.
And that has totally happened to us. We spent 2 hours in the barn one time when what we were supposed to be really doing is walking the pastures. And by the time we got to that, since it was an evening meeting, it was dark. And there was some disappointment associated with that. So looking at the logistics of whatever meeting or gathering it might be is also the role of the facilitator or host. And then just ground rules. In our toolkit, we reference that you could choose to use Robert's Rule of Order or adopt some other rules for your network or group, but hopefully it wouldn't have to be quite that strict. We have really just tried to stress being respectful of others' ideas and comments and time, because we have in our network a variety of production systems being represented. So from very straightforward conventional type farming systems to biodynamic systems where others might not really understand or feel that it's relevant. So there's just so much going on there, and we just want everyone to feel included, and it's been successful by just having common respect. We have had to set some ground rules about people actually leaving farms. So right up front when we gather, we're like, we need to be wrapping up at 8 p.m. because Beth really needs to have some family time before her kids go to bed. So at 8 we're going to be driving down the driveway. Let's not stand around and chit-chat for a couple hours and keep her from what she needs to do. So we've kind of done that. And that's just another form of respect. Also, we've always tried to build in some social time to keep the side conversations down, because when you get a group of people together, they have so much they want to talk about, and it might not have any relevance to what the set topic was for that night. So making sure that everyone knows there's going to be time to be social and either enjoy a meal together or just hang out with a cup of coffee and visit for a bit. Because one of the things that we have just seen is that there's so much joy associated with gathering people together. And even if the topic is pretty intensive, like at this gathering we had at a farmer's house, we were talking, I believe it was about installing irrigation, and there was the knowledge base fluctuated from, yeah, I've done that, no problem, to I've never even considered how I'm going to start this drip irrigation system. But we leave happy and people are having a good time, and I think that is because of the way the meeting was facilitated.
I just want to make one more mention about facilitation, especially in relation to the Breitenbush Farmer-to-Farmer Network, the Northwest Farmer-to-Farmer Network. During those sessions, we actually have the farmers actually facilitate the sessions, and there's been discussion over the years, because it's one thing if you're an organizer or an extension agent or an educator, and you have some of those kind of softer skills. You may not even be aware that you have them, but if you're going to have farmers facilitate groups, it's wonderful, and we see it it's one of the great things about networks is this wonderful opportunity to develop leadership skills in farmers and give them some new tools for either speaking publicly or working with groups. If they want to get into agritourism, for example, these could be great skills, or if they're going to be leaders in the ag community. But they may need some support and some tips. So like an example, we would have these we'd have farmers, farmers will facilitate these groups at Breitenbush, and I remember one example is that one of the farmers had we had about an hour-and-a-half session to talk about winter production, and the farmer decided to have everybody go around and do introductions, and there were 40 people in the room. So by the time we were done with introductions, we were actually out of time, and we had literally like 5 to 10 minutes to talk about winter production. And so that's something that as an educator, you might just like eyeball the room and realize, wow, we have too many people and too little time to do introductions. But as a farmer, as someone who hasn't done facilitated, you may not know that. So making sure, like I said, it's awesome to have producers in that role, but just making sure they have a heads up on some of the easy pitfalls of facilitation. So moving on now to maintaining your network. It can be really exciting to start the network. We found there was huge, for our League of Women Farmers down here, there was just a huge initial surge of interest. There was a lot of excitement. People were thrilled, as I mentioned, especially about the skill building session. And we got about 2 or 3 years in, and then we as organizers started to kind of feel like, oh my gosh, we're running out of topics. We did cover crops 2 years ago, and now people are asking for it again. Or, I have to find another speaker. So there's, burnout can definitely happen. And so just thinking through ways to keep your network going for the long term, we've found that surveying members regularly, whether it's every year, every couple years, finding out what people liked, and then offering new ideas. We've hired people periodically. We've had program assistants come in for a year at a time and do the organizing work, because it isn't difficult work to schedule a session on something and bring in speakers or ask a farmer to host a tour and then email members, but it can get tiresome if you're doing it year in and year out. So bringing in some fresh help on that. And then just recognizing, I think Melissa Ferry mentioned earlier, that the needs of your membership are going to change. And we always say that ideally you're going to organize your way out of a job and there won't be a need for, say, a women farmers network or a beginning farmers network, because it will just be happening naturally. And it used to be that, you didn't necessarily need these organized networks because people were meeting at the Grange pancake breakfasts, or they were going down to the coffee shop, or they were meeting at the feed store, and this kind of networking just kind of happened as part of life. But as demographics and all kinds of social issues have changed, we're bringing back the kind of that type of system that used to just happen. So being aware that your network, your network may at some point become obsolete, and you may not need your network anymore, or you may have a completely different group of farmers that's interested, and so you're going to have to change when and how often you meet, the geographical parameters. So just being being nimble and flexible, and remembering that this group is about the members and their needs is important. And then identifying leadership options. We've found mostly the farmers really don't want to be too involved, aside from hosting tours. They're really pleased that we have some extension funding to make it happen, and they can just kind of show up with their potluck item and give feedback on what types of things they'd like to be covered. But yeah, just having some paid help has been pretty important for us.
And Maud mentioned about surveying the network and just really being able to keep tabs on what's important to the farmers that you're working with at the time. And so we've done a different surveys over time, and it's been good because we can collect the demographic information to find out more about what our target audience is, where they're at, and what they're wanting to do. As an extension, this is great data for impact reporting and for grant writing, so we can show the benefits that are happening and the on-the-ground actions or knowledge gain that's being facilitated through the networks. It also just helps with planning purposes, and then, extension, we like to evaluate everything, so surveying our networks is one way that we do that. In 2012, we did a pretty extensive survey, which you can find in that toolkit publication, all the questions and questions and then the tabulated responses from this survey. But we surveyed all 3 of the Oregon Women Farmer Networks, and so there were about 350 women that were invited to participate. And our overall response rate was pretty low at 44%. And we realized that because one of the largest network that we have in Northern Oregon in the Portland metro area, when people signed up for the network, it was really interesting and it got some publicity and people were excited, so they went ahead and put their email on the list and became part of that listserv, but really didn't have any strong connection or buy-in. So we figured that out through the survey that, okay, there might be 200 women or more in this Northern Oregon network, but really there's not that many that are actively participating to the point where they want to partake in a survey. So that was interesting to find out, and some changes have been made to change that network up a bit. We use an online SurveyMonkey platform to do the survey. We asked 28 questions, and we were really just getting information about these broad categories like logistics, programming needs, and then the demographics of the farmer, how long they've been farming, what types of crops or livestock they're raising, that sort of thing.
So just kind of in conclusion, we just wanted to kind of give a wrap-up, which I've talked a little bit about already, but just that in general we see being really flexible with your network and kind of making sure that you're keeping your finger on the pulse of the members, whether it's through these surveying opportunities, and as Melissa mentioned, we do like to call through and try to talk to our members, and that's a great opportunity to just get that quick needs assessment or just find out like, hey, I noticed you haven't been showing up to meetings for the past 6 months. Is there a reason? Just getting a sense of what people want and how that changes over time. And then we've also just seen a lot of success with balancing between walking through fields, seeing people's specific operations, offering more technical advice or information on up and coming new trends in marketing or new specialty crop products as they come up. And then we haven't had a lot of success with encouraging members to take on leadership responsibilities. There is some research coming out of Cornell University that shows that farmer networks will tend to be more sustainable over time if there is more internal leadership and it's not just externally driven. But in my experience, farmers are busy and they are driving so much in their lives that to be able to just kind of sign up for an organization that's running and that they don't have to do a lot to make it happen is something that they really appreciate and enjoy. So that's been my experience, although the research does show that really it's best if you can get some internal leadership happening.
I've struggled a bit with our network periodically, trying to figure out, the women say they want to, have a particular session and they don't show up, but the timing was right according to the information they gave me, and so I've really struggled back and forth with that. It's been a challenge for me as a coordinator, since this is just a tiny part of the rest of the work that I do. And then one farmer just put it to me one day when I was kind of complaining, I guess, about the network, and she's like, Melissa, it is what it is, and it's perfect for us. We don't need any more structure. There might be a period of time where we don't meet, and then there's going to be kind of this resurgence, and we're going to want to get together again. And so I've really just kind of stepped back and really try to take a lead from them. And when we talk about leadership within the group, I've come to rely on that this last year especially. And somebody will have an idea of what they want to do, and I'm like, great, let me know how I can support you in doing that. And so they will do some of the initial planning, and that's really helped a lot. And I just had to relax and take my type A personality and spread it out a bit and just realize it is what it is. We've referenced this toolkit, creating farmer networks, promoting vibrant farm communities. It is a link off our Small Farms website at Oregon State University. We've used this toolkit in Montana, Idaho, Washington, and here in Oregon as part of a Western SARE grant to work with other states in creating farmer-to-farmer networks. And the project's been a lot of fun, and there's been some success, and we hope that you too might be interested in starting a farmer-to-farmer network in your area. So I guess the moral is networks have been really fun and rewarding for us out here in Oregon. We've heard success stories from different networks on the East Coast and in the Midwest, and there's a lot of room for growth and potential with this peer-to-peer learning style.
Great. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, I'm good. What about you, Maud?
I'm good. Yeah, that's great.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was a ton of great information. And as you can see here on the screen, Melissa and Maud have kindly shared their contact information. So if you have any other questions or specific questions, I'm sure they'd be happy to follow up after the webinar. So there were a couple questions. The first one, Melissa, you sort of touched on through the presentation, but it was just in regards to forming farmer networks in regions that are primarily with large farms or agribusiness. And do you have any other comments that you wanted to share about more of the commercial farm business farmer networks, or if you know of any others around the country?
Oh, well, the concepts that we shared here today, I mean, you might not be doing bouquet making, or maybe you are, I don't know, or have a weekend retreat. But the concepts are the same. I mean, identifying the group of producers, figuring out what their needs are, and then creating some sort of network to make the education, peer-to-peer learning happen. The vegetable producers that were meeting here in the Willamette Valley for quite some time on their twilight tours were all large-scale commercial producers for canneries, and they would meet like at 7 p.m. one weekday evening a month, and until the daylight wouldn't allow it, and they would talk about pretty specific issues for them, whether it be white mold in green beans or cucumber beetle issues. So I don't think that there's anything that you